We're joined by an old friend, Is No God. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys. I've got an interesting question. It relates to how atheism started as a grassroots movement and where it is now. What I'm referring to particularly, at least in my own experience, what I've seen in relation to how atheism started mainly on YouTube. A lot of rather prevalent users came along. Well, at that time they weren't prevalent, but they were knowledgeable on the subjects that they were talking about. People like Aaron Ra, people like Potholer, and as much as it pains me to say this, people like Thunderfoot. And these people are generally rather knowledgeable about their fields in which they spoke. Now, this is how I saw atheism beginning. Now, what I'd like to ask you as the panel is, to what degree do you think atheism has turned into somewhat of a potentially social and political movement? Now, what I mean to say by that is, how many people do you think are now joining atheism for these reasons, as opposed to reasons which were adduced through logic, understanding, and the conclusions that you and I have come to? That's my first question. Then I have a follow-up question to that.
Well, let's deal with the first one first.
All right. First of all, we have to do a bit of a definition here. When you're talking about atheism, it seems that you're talking about the modern understanding of atheism as it is associated with empirical rationalism. While it is true that you can be Buddhist and be atheist, you can be shaman and be atheist. When you say atheist, I suspect that you mean people who do not believe anything on faith, which is a bit different than the word atheism actually means. But is that what you're referring to when you use that word?
Well, broadly, it would have to refer to that.
Yes.
The minute you become an atheist, you automatically abrogate such faith. But to clarify, atheism as a movement, for example, how many people join atheism simply for social reasons without actually coming to the reasoned conclusion that you have? I don't know how long it took you to come to that conclusion, how many times you had to read the Bible before you decided, okay, this does not coalesce with what science tells me. Now, what I want to know is, how many people do you think have joined the movement atheism and hold the same view that you and I do, but have not come to it through that sort of rationale?
There's
simply
quite a
come
lot
to
of...
it as a social movement. Okay, my friend's an atheist, it's cool. When in fact they don't really know either way, but they're just joining it because it's an in thing to do, or because it's popular, whatever the case may be.
Well, I would prefer, certainly, that people, I don't want to say join the movement, but if they're supportive of our position, yes, I get that. I understand that there's a lot of people who simply don't have an interest in religion. I think this applies most of the famous atheists that you always see on the list, like Angelina Jolie and all like this. She's not an activist. She's not in the same category that we are. Most of the famous atheists are apatheists. They don't care about religious beliefs. Religious beliefs don't make sense to them, so they don't become activists. They don't talk about it. It's not of interest. A lot of other people, maybe they just don't believe the stuff that they've been handed. And let's face it, I mean, when you look at the type of people that are promoting religion these days, we are talking about the most reprehensible people one can find in many cases. And the arguments that they come up with are the worst imaginable. So it's not surprising that people would just disregard religion for that reason. I would prefer that everybody that discards religion does so because they've analyzed it as I have, and because they've studied science as I have, and they've weighed all these different things. I get frustrated when I meet atheists who have never had a religious belief, they've never thought about it, they're perfectly fine saying out in public that they're atheists, but they've never read the Bible, they don't care to, they don't feel that they need to. I get frustrated because I want them to have the advantage of some of the background information, and they just don't care about it. And that's unfortunately true, I think, of most atheists. Most atheists don't even realize that they are atheists. They just don't care about religion enough to say anything about it.
Right. From my point, on the YouTube front, for the longest time, we were actually playing catch-up. That for probably the first year, maybe even the first 2 years, people like Venomfang X and what was it called, Jesus Freak. There was a whole horde of these religious folks, and they were actually doing okay, and we were definitely the underdog at that time. Yeah, we've essentially established the position that we have through making the better arguments. And the second thing is that I think at the moment the prime unifier, the thing that brings the secular community together more than anything, particularly in America, is that these people have been living under the social pressure, under the thrall of all this religious majority forever. And that's actually been fairly invasive. You know, they've got no real interest in religion, and yet they've got to go to church, they've got to do all these sort of religious things just to actually fit in. And now all of a sudden they can breathe this sort of deep sigh of relief that I don't have to pretend anymore. It's like sort of all of a sudden not having to pretend that you're straight or something, because society's moved on. And I think that's the prime thing that's unifying the secular movement at the moment, is that there is this huge majority of Christians, and all of a sudden these atheists and rationalists are realizing, hang on, I don't have to pretend that I'm religious anymore. I can actually just...
Can I take issue with that?
Be honest about that. Sure.
Because again, goes back to the reason rally and the significance and consequences of it. I think it was obviously a huge pleasure for a lot of people to realise that they were not alone, and you know, they could mix for that day with like-minded people and enjoy it. But the reality is, isn't it, that when they go back to their homes, to their families, to their work, they might feel somewhat liberated and have fond memories of the reason rally, but they're still going to have to hide it from employers, from family.
No.
Well, if that is the case, why is it that people are still hiding videos on YouTube and hiding their identities on YouTube because they fear that they're going to lose their job as a consequence?
Okay, this is a good time to bring up something.
Let me finish on this one. They know that it's dark at the moment, but they know dawn is coming. Right? They might have flown over the horizon, they've seen the sunrise, and they know that it's coming. And so even though that they've actually gone back and they have to live in the dark, they know that it's not going to be that way forever. They know that there is hope. And I think that's the big difference.
I'm not disagreeing with that. All I'm saying is that I think that the idea that, you know, the Reason Rally or something like that is going to have such an immediate impact is wrong. Aaron, you wanted to add something?
Oh, yes. If anybody that's interested, there's a book that's being done. It's a photojournalistic endeavor that there are many different famous atheists. I think 100 atheists that are being examined by this journalist who's coming into all of our homes and taking pictures and doing interviews with us and everything. He's compiling a book to try to arrest and reverse the idea that only Christians have joy and that atheists are sullen and lost and following along the stereotypes that people put on us. I currently have an advertisement for this guy's book on my YouTube channel right now, featured. So if you look at the featured video of that, what he does is he's taken several snippets from mainstream news media, TV shows and such, where people are openly bashing atheists as fools, as hateful, as lost, as silly, in just the most negative possible way. And this is common. As if people don't feel abashed at all in how they misrepresent us or how they slight us in the least. And that's why this book is coming out. And anybody that's interested in seeing that, I mean, you're talking about the way that we are portrayed and what the Reason Rally meant, as far as people standing up and saying, you know, look at it, we're not lost, we're not sullen, we are joyous, we are happy, we are friends and family and co-workers and so on, and don't deserve this kind of treatment.
I thought that was one of the funniest comments that was made in your exchange that you had, when one of them said about Kirk Cameron that he was lost. The idea that all these atheists are lost and hopeless, I mean, it's crazy. Your response to that, Aaron, do you remember what you said?
He's more lost now than when he was on TV.
We're joined by It's Zippy, who has a striking resemblance to Matt Dillahunty. I thought it was Matt for a moment.
Hello.
Hi, welcome to the show.
We've
Bring it in.
sung together, haven't we, sir?
We have, yes, Houston, Texas.
And I
Yep.
actually have the video. I found the video. I was so... In fact, I did. I posted... I tried to get the conference organisers to get that sung at the conference. And I sent him a clip of... yeah, there was all of it. There was a load of us singing, weren't there?
Yes, I've got a picture with this gentleman on my homepage, rnraw.com. I had the first night that I was in Ireland. I had a wonderful evening in a stereotypical Irish pub with this guy.
I've met you as well.
Yes, you have.
It's massive.
I forgot it was well, almost a year. Well, beginning of June last year. Yes,
Yes, Dublin again.
absolutely, yeah.
We were on the same plane flying over to Washington. You were actually placed in the seat behind me, but then I had to move seats because of the technical issues with the entertainment system, and I couldn't get the thingy up. So I was going to pop over and have a chat, but never got round to it.
That was you.
That was me, yes.
I apologise. I remember it well, and you were sat next to a lady with a leg problem who ended up sitting next to me.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so sorry. I really didn't recognise you. You should have said
That's
something.
right.
This is such a small world.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's much smaller there.
I bet you got, because your screen didn't work, I bet you got upgraded, didn't you?
No, I was already in one of the extra legroom seats.
Right.
And I just moved to one on the other side, but...
I was in one of those extra leg, but I had a free seat, so your screen not working ended up that I lost an extra bit of space. Anyway, let's not go on to that. I'm sorry, I didn't recognise you.
That's okay, it's no problem. Just early, I just want to say it was a fantastic experience going to the Reason Rally, and it was well worth the money to go over there.
I have something to say about that. I mean, I did not see you there. How was that possible?
I was in the crowd. I ended up hooking up with the guys that we met in Houston from the Skeptic Wire podcast,
Okay.
and we were sort of a couple of rows back from the VIP seating. I saw you floating about, but I think most of the time I was underneath someone else's umbrella during a lot of it.
That's the
All right,
thing.
well, I'm sorry I missed you.
Aaron, you don't blend into a crowd.
Yeah.
And you know why, but...
But I mean, going back to one of the points that Aaron said earlier about the problem is faith, the actual concept of faith. You know, believing something for which you've got no justification, no reason, no evidence, or in many cases flying in the face of it. And you know, what I wanted to talk about really is how do we actually challenge that particular concept itself. I mean, we can talk about...
Can I pause you there? Because this was something that I found very interesting. I always assumed that when Aaron was talking about faith, he was talking about a dictionary definition, which my understanding was it is a belief in something for which there is no evidence. But it appears, having listened to his conversation with these two people, he's actually talking about something else, and I'll let him explain. But there are definitions of faith in the Bible. There are about 4 different passages. I was looking at this yesterday, that define what faith is, and I never understood that Aaron was actually referring to them. Aaron, tell us about them.
No, it's not just dictionaries, and it's not just the Bible. It's also the theologians. I mean, when anybody describes faith, when you look at the consensus where they all agree, all of the different authorities on the definition of faith, it really does summarize that faith is an assertion of absolute conviction which is assumed without reason and defended against all reason. And that's really what it is. It is the
but
most...
my point was this: if you look at the dictionary, that's not the definition you get. You're referring to...
It actually is. It actually is. See, you get a dictionary provides 2 contexts. One's a religious context, and one's like a general usage context. And you can have faith in something when they're not talking about religious faith. Okay, like I can't think of an example right now, but one of the ways that they have it defined is that you can have faith as defined as a secure conviction in the truth or accuracy of a given thing, in which case I have it and the creationists don't. But the religious context is the assertion of conviction without evidence, and which is unreasonable, and that's, in that case, they have it and I don't. But the belief without reason, the belief without evidence, and asserted strongly, where you're not allowed to change your mind, where you have to believe wholeheartedly, that is reinforced by all the leading theologians of which I am aware down through history. I'm done talking, DPR.
But it's, I mean, that in itself, as I said before, is the problem. And just as big a problem is the very idea that believing in that way is actually a virtue. And, you know, and it's those two things, the actual faith itself and believing that faith is a virtue, what Dan will probably call belief in belief. But, I mean, it's how I was having a conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and every time he came up with an assertion for his belief, I was able to counter it, and I was able to counter it, and I was able to counter it. And then he said, well, what about faith? What's wrong with that? And I just had to turn around and said everything. And just saying that, his face looked, did you just say that? You know.
But the reason that religion has to advocate faith being a virtue is because they have no evidence for their claims.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, Dan Barker said in his book, you know, Losing Faith in Faith, he said that faith was a cop-out, and that if you had to declare something on faith, it means the same thing as admitting that it can't be taken on its own merits. I mean, I did a speech recently at a local college in the Dallas area. For anybody that's on my webpage, rnraw.com, it's the last public speech that I've got currently listed, where I dealt with the concept of reasonable faith. And if anybody wants to defend faith as a virtue, please see that before talking to me about it. I suppose on this note, it would probably also be good to mention that I'm going to be talking about the same subject in Illinois in 3 weeks' time, and also at a convention called Logicon, which is being held in Arkansas. 2 different events in the same week. And I'm going to be attacking from 2 different angles this concept of faith again, because as I said at least a half a dozen times on different camera interviews at the American Atheist National Convention this last weekend, faith is the most dishonest position it is possible to have. Thank you, Richard. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just trying to find the site that I came across a few days, or yesterday I think it was, in which, as I say, the faith is defined in 4 specific chapters and verses in the Bible, and I can't find it at the moment. I've only got a dictionary definition. Oh no, Bible faith. Here we go. I'll come back to it. It's quite a long article. I'll see if I can find anything interesting.
I can do some in the middle if you're right.
Yeah,
so
please.
I mean, basically, it goes down to, in a technologically advanced civilization, trust is necessary. We can't be all experts on everything, so we basically have to trust people. Now, if people are trustworthy and they tell you the right stuff all of the time, then that's great. However, if people are feeding you bullshit all of the time and you take it on faith, then this is obviously bad, right? So it's when people are, you can get these sort of self-propagating structures, which is essentially religion, where people are expected to take everything on faith. And when you take everything on faith, you can just be entirely wasting your time. And there's this old saying that when you can convince people to believe absurdities, you can convince them to commit atrocities. And yeah, I think this is the underlying danger of all of this.
No, absolutely right. And you know, I do my best whenever I'm having these conversations to try and point that out to people that and I got one of the worst comebacks ever, which I'd love to share with you for a second. It was, well, you know, you've got science, but that changes, and that's shifting sands, you know. And I turned around and said, yeah, but, I mean, faith isn't solid rock. It's thin air. You're not building anything on solid rock at all. You're trying to build it on thin air, because there's absolutely nothing there.
Yeah, what delivers the goods? Science builds great civilizations. Religion. Oh, what did I come up with?
I've got a better way of.
Here we go. No, Aaron, let me just get this one up. Yeah, science builds great civilizations. Religion can't even deliver gobstoppers.
Yeah. No, the analogy that I draw is the game of 20 questions, which is my analogy for the scientific method. For every piece of information that you gather, you hone in, you're zeroing in on the truth. Now, you can't zero in on more than one truth. There's only one. Ultimately, everybody that sits around and plays the game, it doesn't matter how many people are involved in that game, the subject is still going to be the same thing. They're all going to zoom in on the same thing. But with faith, you don't have the process of 20 questions. With them, you cover your eyes and throw the dart there, and then wherever it lands, you say that's absolutely correct. And it's like the game of 20 assumptions. You assume this, and then compounded on that, you assume this other thing too. And then even when you agree initially, you get 20 people to agree on the first assumption, well, then they start deviating. And then, of course, you get different denominations of different religions. Everybody's assuming different things or basing their new assumptions on different assumptions or so on. So it literally is, and I say this literally because we are talking about people that praise going on faith and not on sight. So it is the blind leading the blind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking of the blind leading the blind, someone just put a Bible verse into the chat, and I thought I'd look it up. And I came across the book of Nahum, which I've never heard of before, and the book of Habakkuk.
That's one of the last books of the Old Testament.
Yeah, but I didn't even know these were books. Oh, and then we go to Zechariah. Yeah, Zechariah I've heard of, but wow, those must be really important books. So how many
Well, I
Christians
think
do you
you had an
reckon would be
interesting
able to
point a
tell
few
you?
shows ago when we had Together for Peace on Thunder, where you quoted a short section from the Book of Revelation, and Together's answer was, well, you can't just quote one small passage, and your retort was, that is the majority of what happens. Most theists will quote 90% of the time about 1% of the Bible.
Absolutely. 90% of the Bible quotes are sort of single detached lines.
And it's all the same. It'll be John 3:16 or Matthew 5:17 or whatever. It's the same old stuff. And what they don't, as you say, they don't refer to the book of Ruth.
Yeah.
Or the book of whatever you've just referred to. No one's ever heard of that book.
Yeah,
Or
well,
Luke 17:34. 2 men in one bed. 2 men in one bed.
But then, so what? They've quoted the Bible at us. I mean, we can probably give numerous examples of where the Bible is flat out wrong, where it contradicts itself internally. And I start thinking,
Isaiah 45, 4, 5, and 6, or no, 5, 6, and 7. And then, let's see, how about Numbers 5, the entire chapter, right after about the 3rd verse on, where it promotes abortion and is in violation of everything about the sanctity of marriage. And so on.
So why should any of us that have already rejected the Bible be impressed by having Bible quotes thrown at us? I don't know why they seem to think that is an argument. I was about to say a rational argument, which it certainly isn't a rational argument, but it's not even an argument.
Somebody asked me if I were to testify in a courtroom, would I swear on the Bible? And I said, well, I wonder if it would be permissible for me to swear on a phone book, because at least I could show that was true.
Yeah, well, I always affirm anyway, so it's never an issue for me.
What I thought was interesting, when people say, what they would normally argue is, well, I can rely on the Bible because it is the Word of God. And I know it's a circular reason, let's not bother even going down that route. But when you say to them, well, which Bible? The majority of people say, well, the King James Version of the Bible, of course. Why that one? Well, because that's the definitive Word of God. This Bible, which I took from the hotel in DC, is the King James Bible. The very first page says this: translated out of the original tongues and with former translations diligently compared and revised.
Yeah.
They're accepting on their own book that it's been revised and changed and translated from other works. Yet this apparently is supposed to be the definitive one-off Word of God. It's crazy.
The other thing they say, when they actually say, it's the Word of God. Yes, but you haven't even demonstrated your God exists in the first place. So not only have you not demonstrated that your God exists, you can't claim that the Bible is the word of God to prove God. Again, part of this whole circular argument.
That's the great thing. I can't prove to you what God says, but I can tell you what he thinks.
Richard, I got a question for you. I mean, I'm delighted that you made it to the Reason Rally. I was happy to see you at the Texas Free Thought Convention. What brings a representative of Atheist UK to so many American events of this kind?
Well, I became a convention junkie. I first went to the Atheist Alliance International Convention in Burbank. I think that was 2009. Absolutely loved it, and it now forms part of my annual holiday. I've developed lots and lots of friends in the American atheist community across the board. So it forms part of my holiday. Partly also in solidarity for those of you that live in a country where you know, in the UK, being an atheist on the whole is no big deal. And I'm a people person. I like mixing with people, and I like attending the talks and the speeches. I mean, for example, the Lawrence Krauss speech, the Universal Nothing speech, which he gave in Burbank. I'm so pleased that I was actually physically there and actually managed to go up to him afterwards and ask him some questions about what he said. So it's the whole social experience, friendship, camaraderie.
See, I've seen you also in pictures that were, you know, like other people have uploaded to Facebook and such, and I would for other conventions that I couldn't make it to. I mean, I would see like PZ Myers and you at all these different conventions. I would love to travel as much as you do, but it's good to see you coming out to these things.
Oh, absolutely. I love it, and all the time I've got the time and money to do them, I will continue to do so. So I'm sure I'll see each of you around at other events at some point.
I hope so. Well, and I hope next time I'll actually recognise you, and I do apologise. I was sat next to him on the plane. I didn't realise.
You got to pull a mind scramble on him now. Next time you turn up, put a wig on or something.
Well, I actually had. I also involved in amateur theatre, and I had to grow my hair for my last performance and shave the beard off, and a lot of people didn't actually recognise me when I came on stage. So that was quite fun. But I was so glad to shave it all off afterwards.
I have to say, this is one of the interesting things about the frailty of identification evidence. Had I been asked to describe the gentleman sitting in front of me, I wouldn't have described the goatee. I don't remember the goatee. So there you go.
Yeah, and I'm not Matt Dillahunty, because thanks to Aaron, I now have photographic proof that we are different people. And I keep getting it on my my YouTube channel, which I haven't actually used in the last 2 years, but I'm still getting messages asking me if I'm Matt. And at conferences, I keep getting asked it as well. We are not the same people. We are totally different. I am a lot bigger than he is.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Take care.
I'll see you around.
Yeah.